an extension, a season-ending injury, tryouts, and more. We get into it all here on Locked On Ravens next.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com and tell them Locked On sent you. And we return here with a Tuesday edition episode of Locked On Ravens. Unfortunately, Spencer Schultz of Baltimore Beatdown could not be here with us today, but I am still here. We are still going to be talking Ravens football, and it's funny how this stuff works out because there was so much news that happened for the Ravens on Monday, and it all kind of happened towards the late afternoon and the early night type stuff where we got an extension and we got a season-ending injury and some tryout news as well. So we'll be diving into all of that here today on Locked On Ravens, and it'll be, I think, pretty simple in terms of how we'll do it. We'll be talking about of course, Mark Andrews extension here in this first segment and just diving into what it means for the Ravens, the money, the guaranteed stuff, what this makes him in terms of actual tight end payments, if he's the highest second paid or third highest paid tight end, something like that. In the second segment, we'll be diving into the season-ending injury of Justice Hill and what it means for not only Hill himself, but also the Ravens running back room. And then that kind of segues right into our final segment where we'll just be talking about the players the Ravens tried out on Monday and getting into a few guys who aren't on that list who could also make a bit of sense for the Ravens in terms of who they could sign, because right now the Ravens only have 2 running backs on their roster. But if you're here on YouTube with me today, this is our second YouTube episode. So continually learning about the whole YouTube process. I appreciate everybody who is tuning in here, but I'm also appreciative of everybody who's tuning in on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, any audio form, because those forms are not going away anytime soon. In fact, they're not going away. This is now an audio and a video podcast. So if you haven't subscribed yet and you like the content here, be sure to subscribe, turn notifications on, and also be sure to follow us on any audio form of the podcast. So that can include Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, and much more. And also be sure to follow us on Twitter at Locked On Ravens. And of course, my personal account at KOstriker34. So with all that being said, let's dive right into it here. And starting off with that big Mark Andrews extension. This is an extension that I'm so ecstatic for both parties, for Andrews and for the Ravens. This was a move that was kind of anticipated for a long time. I think by both sides too. We've seen clips of Mark Andrews saying, yeah, I want to be in Baltimore for a long time, forever. And it seemed like with his production, with how well he, one, gets along with Lamar Jackson, but two, is able to go out there and produce weekly on the football field at a position where it's not easy to find that kind of production. Andrews is someone who was definitely up for a big money extension. Andrews gets a 4-year, $56 million extension. That's a lot of money. But the Ravens and Andrews wanted to get something done, and it's good that they got it done before the season. And it's seeming less and less likely that I think the big contract that everybody's waiting for in Lamar Jackson is going to get done before the season. But these things can take time. As we saw here with Mark Andrews, it didn't happen right away. These are things that the language has to be worked around and kind of picked apart for the player and the team to completely understand, all right, this is what we're actually getting out of this deal. So for Andrews, his 4-year, $56 million extension in terms of average annual value makes him actually the third highest tight end paid per average annual value, coming in just below Travis Kelce and George Kittle. And honestly, look, I think this is the perfect slot for Andrews. I think that he is the third best tight end in the NFL. And when looking at it that way, the Ravens definitely got a good deal here, but Andrews also got a good deal. This isn't like Andrews took a 3-year, $30 million contract, and it feels like Andrews was fleeced out of some money. No, Andrews gets a pretty good chunk of money, while the Ravens don't pay a really good player the top dollar at his position, which for some players, it sometimes comes out that way, even though they don't necessarily deserve it. So I'm very excited for Mark Andrews. I'm very excited for the Ravens. I mean, pulling up Mark Andrews' stats here, 156 total receptions for 2,105 yards and also 20 touchdowns. His best year came in 2019 when he had 64 receptions for 852 yards and 10 scores. And Andrews is somebody who has evolved over the course of his 3-year career. He's now in year 4. But I think when Andrews came into the league, very good receiving prospect. But one of the knocks on him was his blocking. And in no way, shape, or form has Mark Andrews turned into, a Nick Boyle type player, but he has definitely improved on his blocking. And I know teams in his rookie season and maybe even a bit in 2019, his second year, saw Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle on the field and always stacked the side of the field that Nick Boyle and fullback Patrick Ricard were on because they thought, all right, well, Andrews isn't that good of a blocker. There's no way they'll run and pull to his side. They're going to pull to Boyle's side to have their strong blocker there. So now Andrews is a threat both as a receiver and as a blocker, which I think is just perfect for this Ravens team. He fits into what the Ravens are doing. And it's not like this contract is necessarily going to break the bank. Now, in terms of actual what the contract is going to look like in 4 years when he's entering year 4, we don't know the exact splits of it quite yet, at least not at the time of this recording. But it would make sense that it could be a bit back-loaded, but also the other way, it could be front-loaded as well. You really don't know with these contracts. The Ravens, they have pushed money down the line before, but now with so many big money contracts coming in, the Ravens obviously having that Jackson extension on the horizon, you could see it be a bit front-loaded and kind of have their money invested in some players early on in their contracts, and then some players towards the end of their deals, they'll get that money. For example, Marcus Peters had a lot of his money front-loaded, at least in that first year for him. So he had, I can't remember exactly, it might have been $20 million out of his $40+ million extension. So the Ravens, Eric DeCosta, everybody who works in that decision-making department have done a great job at retaining key players. It's not like the Ravens are throwing money at every single player who produces. They're looking specifically at, all right, what does this guy bring to the team? Can we get a viable replacement? If you think about it, if you think about what Mark Andrews brings to the Ravens, he's not necessarily going to depart and then the Ravens are going to just bring in somebody and, oh, yay, it's Mark Andrews again. No, there's not that replacement level player. At least it's very, very hard to find a player like Mark Andrews at his position, especially one who has bought into the Ravens culture, who has been able to do a lot of different things. And I mentioned the involvement that he has had as a player in recent seasons, especially his second and third year. So he's still a very young player. He deserves every penny of this deal. I'm sure Lamar Jackson is ecstatic, as are the rest of his Ravens teammates. We've seen it already on Twitter. Guys like Deshaun Elliott and Marquise Brown congratulating Andrews. And it's just the whole team camaraderie thing, which is amazing to see. It's great to see. So this is a big-time move for the Ravens. I know a lot of people were wondering about, all right, when is this deal getting done? Because whether there was a sense of nervousness, because Andrews was scheduled to be a free agent after this season. He was picked in the 3rd round of the 2018 draft, so there was no 5th-year option, whereas for Lamar Jackson, who was picked in the 1st round, and I mean, if you want to throw Hayden Hurst in there, you can, but those guys have 5th-year options that they could have been picked up or declined. And for the Ravens, they did pick up Jackson's 5th-year option. So the Ravens get a key contributor on offense under contract, joining a bunch of other big money guys for the Ravens, such as Marlon Humphrey and Ronnie Stanley and a couple of others as well. So this was a deal that I expected to get done. I didn't really know when. It could have been yesterday. It could have been today. It could have been a week, a month down the line. But the Ravens overall, I think, made out very well. And also Andrews made out very well. I think that overall the offense is obviously what benefits the most here, and the losers are opposing defenses, because with Andrews, you can't just key in on the wide receivers. Andrews is a middle-of-the-field threat. He can beat you downfield too if you're not careful. He's able to get open. He has learned over the course of his first 3 seasons to get open within NFL defenses and kind of find the holes, work back to Lamar Jackson, much like a veteran should be able to. And Andrews is no 10-year veteran or anything. We'll get there, but he's not there yet. So I think that the Ravens have a good core right now. Obviously, Lamar Jackson is the most likely guy to be extended next, but the Ravens made a great move in the signing or extending of Mark Andrews. But we're going to head into our first break now. And when we get back, we're going to be getting into the Ravens and their season-ending injury, another season-ending injury on this team. So stay tuned for that. And we will be right back. But it's that time of year again, and all eyes are now turning to football as teams are back on the gridiron to start the football season. As always, BetOnline is your number one spot for all the pro and college football action this season. Get all the updated odds, props, and contests, including online's biggest $500,000 NFL mega contest and the world's largest $200,000 NFL Survivor contest open now at BetOnline. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 100% welcome bonus. Be sure to take advantage of their opening day super promo. Make a bet on the Thursday, September 9th season opener between the Super Bowl champion Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys. And if you lose, your wager will be refunded up to $25 for new customers only when signing up and using promo code NFL100. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports, from football, basketball, boxing, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait and take advantage of all the great offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. And we return here with another segment, Locked On Ravens, segment 2. And we're transitioning from, I guess, the happy news of Mark Andrews to the relatively sad news, and that is another season-ending injury that the Ravens made public, and it was widely reported by a lot of NFL media members, and that is the injury to another running back. And luckily it's not Gus Edwards, but unfortunately it is Justice Hill. And for Justice Hill, this is a pretty big blow to his, one, chances to make an impact in Baltimore for this year, of course, as he's going to be out for the year, but two, for future years, because Hill was expected to have, I think, somewhat of a bounce back year 3 if he did make the final roster, which was obviously a question mark, especially because for the Ravens, they have a bunch of other running backs now who have showed up and really done a lot with the time that they have had on their roster. So Tyson Williams made a really big impression for them during the 2021 training camp, during the 2021 preseason. Nate McCrary, unfortunately, got claimed by the Denver Broncos, but he still kind of outperformed Justice Hill because Hill was injured with an ankle. He left a lasting impression of 5 carries for 8 yards in his first and only action of the 2021 preseason. So looking at that, it didn't really seem likely until J.K. Dobbins did go down with his injury. And then it became, okay, well, now there's probably a spot for Justice Hill. Now, the value that Hill brought to the team on offense, he's not a terrible, horrible player. I think a lot of people saw Justice Hill and his production throughout his first 2 seasons, and they're like, okay, why is this guy not performing well? You know, he just didn't have a lot of opportunities. He was behind guys such as Dobbins and Gus Edwards and also Mark Ingram. And so he didn't really get a lot of touches in an offense where, coming out of Oklahoma State, he was the primary guy there. And so with him, he has a lot of different traits that the Ravens valued a lot. He's very shifty. He's a bottle of electricity, a bottle of lightning, really, when looking at just what he brings to the table. He can receive out of the backfield. He is very deceptive with his power. People don't really look at Justice Hill and say, wow, what a power back. But he'll run over somebody. He will do it. And also, I think one of the biggest places of value for Justice Hill on the Ravens is his special teams work, as he was working as a gunner for the Ravens and has been working as a gunner for the Ravens for a very long time. And that was one of the biggest attributes that he brought to the Ravens that I think they valued, and they are losing in Justice Hill. And this is big because the Ravens also lost a very big key contributor on special teams already for the season in LJ Fort. And so they're now down LJ Fort. They're now down Justice Hill. And those two guys made up, they're not the entire special teams unit, but it would have been nice to have 2 veterans who had been around the block with special teams. They had known just what it takes to play it at the NFL level, and they had that talent. But the show does go on, and we will dive into in the final segment just who the Ravens could bring in, who they have already brought in for tryouts, and all of that stuff. But the Ravens right now, the bigger implications of this, the Ravens with Dobbins going down, and with Hill going down, and with McCrary now in Denver, the Ravens only have 2 running backs on their roster right now that are healthy, and that is Gus Edwards and that is Tyson Williams. Now, the talent between those 2 is there's no doubt. But when looking at what the Ravens need, the Baltimore Ravens, are a rushing team. They are a run-first offense that uses a primary running back, but it's not like he's the workhorse. He's not that guy for them. The Ravens, they like to use guys in tandem, keep their guys fresh. And that's not just running backs. It's all positions. We've seen it in the secondary before for sure. But for the Ravens, they have a bunch of guys who could be out there, who could come in and play a role, but there's a specific type of role that the Ravens are going to be looking for here, I think. And that is someone who can catch the football out of the backfield and has at least somewhat of a proven track record of doing that, whether it be in college, whether it be at the pro level, because I think for Edwards, he has added that to his game, but it is not something he has done at the NFL level. For Tyson Williams, he is obviously coming into his own right now and has shown a lot, but we have to see what he is as a pass catcher. So the Ravens have brought in some guys. Maybe they can work, maybe they can't. Hill in particular, wasn't the strongest pass catching option out of the backfield, but now the Ravens have the opportunity to go and add that type of player. But it's about who knows the playbook. And the Ravens, they'll be bringing in somebody who, with less than a week to go before the regular season, because at the time of this recording, there has not been somebody signed. So with less than a week to go before the regular season begins, the Ravens are in Vegas playing the Las Vegas Raiders. They're just not going to have somebody who knows the playbook and who has been around the organization, knows what the values are and has been in and out of that playbook and is familiar with what the Ravens do on offense. So that's a big implication of this whole thing. And obviously it's unfortunate that Justice Hill goes down. You never want to see an injury for any player. And the Ravens have been kind of sniffing around running backs. Definitely. I know the loss of McCrary was not ideal. And that was someone who the Ravens would have loved to have on their practice squad. And in this situation in particular, that's where this would have come in handy. And the Ravens could have brought him up. He would have been in the playbook. He would have known what to expect. He would have had preseason action, live games in the preseason in order to have that. And I think that's really important. So for Justice Hill, I think, I'm not going to say it spells the end of his time in Baltimore, but, with him kind of being on the bubble already, with McCrary emerging and with Dobbins being what Dobbins is and with Edwards being what Edwards is, and, with the Williams and McCrary shows there, of course, Hill was probably not going to make the roster, in my opinion, in 2021, unless an injury happened. An injury did happen, and Hill got on the roster. But the bigger issue now turns to the 2021 season, what the Ravens have immediately just on their team right now, and that is not a lot of running back depth at a position that looked very, very deep. Now the Ravens have lost 2 to injured reserve and have lost 1 to waivers, leaving them with just 2. So looking at it that way, it's terrible. It's a terrible development for the Ravens, because regardless of what people thought of Hill, regardless of if they thought he was great, if he was terrible, he was consistent in terms of he knew what the Ravens did on offense. And he had been in 2 years. This is not a rookie coming in, not having any game action like potentially Nate McCrary, but Hill had been in the offense before. He had been in those live game situations. He had contributed and actually done a lot for the Ravens in those situations. So I think that the Ravens will make a move, whether that is today or tomorrow, very soon. I know Todd Gurley's been a name that's been thrown out there. We'll kind of talk about him in the final segment as well, but that was back a couple months ago. I don't really know if that is really that big of an option anymore. It could be not as much. So we'll talk about options in the final segment, but for Hill, I think that the Ravens will miss his production primarily on special teams, but also just as a running back and his ability to break out. We were anticipating the breakout of J.K. Dobbins and so excited. Everybody was so excited about, wow, well, J.K. Dobbins is going to rush for 1,500 yards and 12 rushing touchdowns and be this great guy as a receiver. But for Hill, he was kind of that under the radar player that a lot of people, I think, forgot about because of Williams and because of McCrary. And obviously the injury that happened to Dobbins put him back into relevance. But before that, I want to go back to before training camp started. I think a lot of people, myself included, were excited about Hill and his potential for a year 3 breakout. And I don't think for me that ever went away. But I think it became, it kind of went down on my list because we saw what Williams could do and we saw what McCrary could do. And Hill had that 5 carry for 8-yard performance. And then it was just like, well, what have you done for me lately in this NFL league here? And it was 5 carries for 8 yards in the preseason. Now the offensive line was not great, so I don't think that was a fair judgment call for anybody to base it just off of that, because we saw the offensive line improve tremendously in the second game and in the third game as well. So Hill didn't really get as fair of a shot as some of the other guys like Tyson Williams and Nate McCrary did. I don't think that has anything to do with him as a player, but it is disappointing because Hill is he wasn't a huge part of the offense. He was going to be third in line between Edwards and Williams. Those are the two that were in front of him. But again, I keep bringing it back to the consistency of having players know the playbook, especially this late into the offseason when there's not really a ton of wiggle room between bringing in somebody in the first game for the Ravens. Now, I mean, there is an extra day or night between the Ravens playing the Las Vegas Raiders on Monday night as opposed to Sunday night or Sunday afternoon. But the loss of Hill, I think, is an under-the-radar big one, but it's not the end of the world, of course. The loss of Justice Hill, I don't think it's going to define the Ravens season. It's not going to hurt nearly as much as Justice Hill or as J.K. Dobbins' loss. And I think that the Ravens in general, they will be okay. They will survive this. It's tough losing two running backs in such a short amount of time. I mean, again, a position that I just thought was so deep is now thin, and it's probably the thinnest position on their roster because they need to add somebody who will be either a proven option who has been around the block at the NFL level before or a younger player who has the potential to fill a role for the Ravens and what they need out of the running back position. And we're going to talk about those guys who could be potential options for the Ravens, who they brought in on Monday for tryouts, and just a couple other guys who aren't on that list who could be actual options that people might not be thinking about. So we're going to talk about those in the final segment, but this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Wind from pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning, and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, locked on in there. How'd you hear about us, box? So they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. And does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows. You're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you've got neighbors, best friends log in for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all that entertainment you love without the hassle and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings you live TV and on-demand and your favorites together like never before so you can watch your favorite sports moments, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. And we return here with our final segment of this Tuesday edition of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oshak, your host, still here with you. And we've talked about the Mark Andrews extension, and we've talked about the unfortunate season-ending injury to Justice Hill. But now we're going to dive into some players who could replace Hill because the Ravens are going to need a third running back on their roster. They have two running backs on their active roster right now. They have no running backs on their practice squad. For a team that runs the ball as much as the Baltimore Ravens, yeah, they're going to need a running back, at least the third running back on this roster. So a couple options who the Ravens did bring in for tryouts on Monday, who they're obviously looking at. Le'Veon Bell, Devonta Freeman, and Elijah Holyfield. So those three guys are really interesting. I think Bell and Freeman, obviously, the two who are the veterans. And for Holyfield, he's someone who is on the younger side. He's only 23 years old, but is a really interesting option and is a former Georgia star for them. So I'm going to run through the stats of these guys first here. We'll talk about first Le'Veon Bell because Bell is the most accomplished by far out of any of the options here. Bell, over his career, ever since it started in 2013 with the Steelers, has had 1,556 attempts for 6,453 yards and 40 rushing touchdowns. And he's also added 8 touchdowns through the air as he's had 394 receptions for 3,259 yards and 8 scores there. So for Bell, what does he bring? You know, all these guys are not the players they were, Le'Veon Bell's best year with the Steelers or years came in anywhere from 2014 to 2017. He obviously had the thing where he sat out for 2018. But other than that, I think that the Ravens definitely would benefit from having Bell on their roster. But Bell, I don't think people should expect a lot out of Le'Veon Bell. Also, for him, there's some off the field stuff, whether he's a fit in their locker room, which is a very real question. He was bashing Andy Reid, who is one of the most liked coaches in the NFL. So I don't really know what was up with that, but okay. And the Ravens with Bell, very talented player, very talented pass catcher. And I talked about the role that the Ravens would need this guy, this running back, to have on their roster. And to me, I think that is the Ravens just needing a pass catching guy who can also give them some production running the football, whether that be between the tackles, getting to the edge on pulls or whatever. So I think that Bell could be an option for them. Freeman is a little bit less of a player at this point in his career, struggled with the Giants in 2020, only averaged 3.2 yards per carry there. Over his career, 1,005 carries for 4,144 yards and 33 touchdowns. Also added 264 receptions for 2,073 yards and 11 scores through the air. So again, these are guys who catch the football and are able to do stuff not as just a runner, but as a pass catcher. And I think the Ravens, and we heard J.K. Dobbins speak about it, and we heard Gus Edwards speak about it, and even the coaches, they've said that, yeah, we're going to use that part of the game a bit more and getting the running backs looks out of the backfield. So I think that it would be wise for them to do something like that. And finally, Elijah Holyfield is someone who is not a very proven option, came into the league a couple years ago after spending 3 years at the University of Georgia. But his stats at the University of Georgia, definitely intriguing. Didn't really come on until his final year, had 159 attempts for 1,018 yards and 7 scores. In 2018, overall, 215 carries for 1,340 yards and 9 scores. Now, Holyfield is not that proven as a receiver in his 3 years in college. 1 reception for 19 yards, 1 reception for 4 yards, and 5 receptions for 40 yards. So was not getting a ton of looks out of the backfield as a receiver. That's where I think that Holyfield, if you're looking at him in terms of what he can bring as an overall package, I think that he has the most upside by far out of the guys the Ravens brought in. And I would not be mad at a Holyfield signing. He has a lot of traits. He runs very well, runs very hard, is a bit speedy, something where the Ravens could use that. But I think that if they want a veteran option, Bell, aside from the off-the-field issues, is a better option than Devonta Freeman right now. Although, honestly, it's kind of close. I think I want to put the point across that the Ravens are not looking for a running back one. They're not looking for someone to come in and replace the J.K. Dobbins production. That's not what they're doing. Anybody who comes in for the Ravens, it would be a very pleasant surprise if they were able to produce, 800 yards rushing or 600 yards rushing, right? They're not looking for that. They're looking for somebody who can come in and play a role. And that doesn't necessarily mean finding a stud. And if the guy isn't doing well for the first couple games, it's all right, cut bait, he's done, he's trash. That's not what this is. The Ravens need somebody in a role who can fill a role, not somebody who's going to come in and be their number one back. They have that already, but they also need to be prepared in case of an injury. So unfortunately, if that does happen, that running back will be replacing, they're not necessarily replacing, but they'll be on the docket for more carries and more receptions. So they have to keep that in mind as well. So it's not just, all right, we're going to bring in an unproven option and hope that they can do some stuff. Because if you bring in an unproven option, again, that's great. And, they have the upside. And if they've shown it, whether it be through preseason or regular season or college, that's okay. But a veteran option to me, I think would be better. Now, who is a veteran option besides Le'Veon Bell and Devonta Freeman? Well, one that caused controversy for sure, and one that I put out there, maybe a trade in the Houston Texans backfield. They have 3 guys there right now, and David Johnson, Phillip Lindsay, and a very familiar face in Mark Ingram. Maybe Mark Ingram. Mark Ingram is somebody who did not perform very well in 2020. He is not who he once was. He is not the 2019 version either. But Ingram knows the offense. He is good as a pass catcher. He is good in pass protection, and he can give the Ravens what they need. Now, the money would be a bit tricky. He would put them right up against the cap. I think the Ravens have about $1.6 million available in cap space, and the Texans signed Ingram to a $2.5 million contract, but the base salary is $1.5 million. So it would leave them with about $100,000 in cap space, But I think if you throw the Texans conditional 7th or the 6th round pick from the Dolphins and bring in somebody who knows the system, has been a positive presence in that locker room, and is well liked by the organization, I think that's a really good move for them. Also, I would not be opposed to Lindsey. David Johnson, the contract is not great, so I don't know how that would work. People have mentioned Rashad Penny, Alex Collins, DJ Dallas in that Seattle backfield. That's another option that I think could work out if the Ravens are looking for the trade route. I think those are the two backfields I'm looking at for trades. It's Houston and it's Seattle. Those two are the best options for me in terms of actually trading for guys. And then again, I did talk about Todd Gurley a tiny little bit in the second segment. He's a Baltimore guy. The homecoming would be awesome. I know that he wants to be in Baltimore. At least I think he does. That's what I've read. But the knees for Todd Gurley just are not what they need to be. And it's unfortunate because he was such a good player. And I mean, he still could bring something to the Ravens. But honestly, if Gurley signs for the year and he gets injured 3 games in, or his knees just start to fail him again, the Ravens are back to square one. They have 3, 4, 5 weeks, however many weeks Gurley played without having another running back on their roster, learning the system, getting familiar, and then they just have to go out and sign another player or bring somebody up from their practice squad who they might not feel as comfortable with. So I understand the Gurley hype. I understand why it would be a good signing, but I also understand why it would be a bad signing. There are all these other issues too. Like, let's go back to Mark Ingram. Mark Ingram's not the perfect signing. His efficiency got shot. He's not the same player he was due to his injury. On first down, he was one of the worst rushers in the NFL. So there are clear reasons against signing all these players, but the Ravens have to go with something. They have to bring in somebody else who can run the rock. And I think that a veteran option would be better. But look, it would not surprise me if today or tomorrow or whenever, in the next couple days, the Ravens went out there and they signed Elijah Holyfield because he is the younger option, and I think they had some interest in him. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I remember a lot of people liking him coming out of college and thinking he was an option for the Ravens. So I wouldn't be shocked at that whatsoever, but the Ravens do have to get something done with the running back in the next couple of days because they are running very, very thin on that, or in that positional group right now. But that's all that I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens, our second ever YouTube episode is in the book. Still kind of getting used to it. Again, it's been only audio for me for over 2 years. So sitting in front of a camera doing this all in one take, it's different. It's really different from doing it in an actual audio form where, you have the edits and you can do all this different stuff with the audio. But now it's one take all the way through. So as we continue here on YouTube, I'm excited for this journey. And if you haven't subscribed already, I highly recommend you do so. If you do enjoy the content, be sure to leave a like. It helps the YouTube algorithm out. And also, we're not going anywhere on audio as well. I think for 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, I do want to do something. Again, I don't know what it is yet, but I am taking suggestions. I'm not saying I'll do the suggestions, but I think it'd be fun to take suggestions. So once we get to 1,000 subscribers, I'll do something, and you can help me get there. So if you haven't already, I'd appreciate any subscriptions. But that's all that I have for you today here on Locked On Ravens. When we get back here tomorrow, we'll be diving into your mailbag questions. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you tomorrow.